All right, great. So the first thing you'll want to do for this assignment is go into assignments, and this is the Pro Tools Audio Loops project. And there is a folder of samples. So you're going to make your own composition out of popular music samples is the idea of the project. So you'll want to download that first and then download the directions as well. So I have the directions over here already. And to start by right away with the project, you want to open up this folder. I suggest you could download it just to your desktop and just take a look at the samples and just take a quick, listen for what you might want. So I have a pretty good variety of stuff. And if you have a Mac, you can just like sample them here. So we have some older stuff. We have some, have some jazz samples, Michael Jackson, and they're short little samples. That's the drum beat from Billie Jean. So kind of get an idea of what you're drawn to, pick stuff that you like. You always have a better project if you're working with stuff you like. So do that first, go through, download the samples and just take a little listen. And then over here, you can see the directions. So this project will learn how to import audio into Pro Tools and how to work with editing tools. So this is not like a recording tech project. This is more just like, how does Pro Tools work and how do I just edit a basic track in Pro Tools? It is a composition project, however, so you all get to be composers and sort of put something together from samples. So it's fun in that regard. Here's the requirements. So you'll submit a 2 to 3 minute MP3 of your song. And I'll show you how to export that in Pro Tools. You have to use at least 4 of the provided samples. I encourage you to use more if you like, but at least 4. I feel like 4 gives you enough material to work with. You could pick a bass-oriented one, a drum one, maybe more of a percussion extra kind of thing. So you can check it out, see what you like. You have to do a little manipulation of them as well. So you have to change the speed of at least 2 samples and change the effect of at least 2 samples. So that's where we're going with this. So process, download the samples, and then I suggest you can just create a short 2 or 4 bar phrase to kind of get you going with this and give yourself kind of a palette of a main track to work with just to get started, because it can be a little bit intimidating, like, oh, where do I start? Just get something laid down and get going initially. That's what I suggest. All right, so Pro Tools. Here we go. So creating your first Pro Tools thing. We're going to go create new, and it's very important in Pro Tools that you are very specific about where it goes and how it's saved. Pro Tools doesn't just have like a single file that goes with it. It has this whole nested group of stuff, and the more stuff you do to Pro Tools session files, the more stuff there is. So don't try to move a session file. Just be very deliberate about where you're going to put it. Remember the name that you're going to use. So I suggest that you say project for audio loops. And then I'm going to put Murray. And I'm going to put Murray 1 because I think I already have something named that on here. Great. Then you'll notice some of the settings. Just use the local storage. You can use the cloud if you know how that works. Here, I just recommend doing a local session, especially if you're on your own computer at home. Let's just work with the sample rate 44.1. This is a lower sample rate, which is fine. We're not doing super high quality audio production. It'll make things load fast. 24-bit and file type WAV is fine. Be very noticing of this location, users CMarray documents. And if you're on the Macs in the lab, if you control click on this little guy, you can see your own directory whenever you're logged in. So it's a little bit elusive trying to find files if you aren't familiar with Mac. So control click, you can always find your directory. That's where it'll put this session file according to this location down here. So users, CMRA, and then documents. So, all right, then we're ready to click create. I was working on it in that project before, yes, okay. Great, so here we have our basic session setup. We've got, this is what's called the editing window, and it's got all these features of timing and tempo and all these things you can do. But what we're gonna do is just set up a track. So new track, under track. And in this one, let's do stereo, audio, okay, and samples, that's fine. And we'll just call it audio for now because we don't know what we're gonna drag into the track. So yay, we have our first track. Doesn't that look wonderful? We can just do, a lot of times if you're doing recorded stuff, it's very official how you get stuff in here and import it, but we're just gonna do kind of what I call a hack way. We're just gonna drag and drop into the editing window. So let's say I liked this Al Green track, so I'm just gonna drag that right in. Yay, I got sound in the file. And let's see if it plays. Woohoo! All right, it plays. Great. I'm going to move it over. When you drag one of these files in, I suggest you rename it what it is so that you can keep track of your editing. So rename it. I'm going to call it Al Green because that's what it is. And now I know this track, Al Green, I know what I'm working with. You can just double click here. That's how you rename each time. All right, so about some basics of editing. So the way I listened to this is with the space bar. And anytime you click space bar, space bar is your play and stop button. So you'll be pushing space bar a lot. And if you're listening to me do this, you'll hear this over and over again, right? Editing is kind of a maddening thing, actually. All right, so in my directions here, click above the edit window to start playback. So do you see how this little bar is created? That's where it's going to start playing. So if I go further to the end, it'll be at the end. So you see how little cursor is created? Or I can go up here in the timing window if you want to prefer to work later on with timing. See how little arrows created? As you have more stuff, it'll play from that spot. Some of the tools we'll be working with are up here. So these are our, for this project, we're going to be working with these 3 tools. Do you see how there's this little bar here? They're kind of nested together. If I click on one, only one is activated. Or I can do, this is a later feature of Pro Tools. If you click on this bar, it's called the Smart Tool. It highlights all 3 of these tools. This is the loop trim tool, the selector tool, and the grabber tool. And you'll see when I come down here, do you see how the little icon changes? Like it turns into a hand if I go down here. So when it turns into a hand, it's on the grabber tool. And this is just exactly what it says. It's, you can move the clip around. Or you can actually, if there's other tracks, you can move it. Let me create another track because we're gonna need another track anyway. Stereo, audio, create. So the grabber tool, you can also move it into the track. The selector tool is this cursor looking thing, and you can actually select parts of the track. This is useful if you like a certain part of the track, you want to select it, push Command C, which is copy, and I can put the cursor back and copy that chunk, just like you do with text in a document. You can do it with sound data in Pro Tools, so that's really fun. So that's the selector tool and the grabber tool. Those are pretty straightforward. The trim tool allows you to basically trim the beginning of the end. You see if I go further, there's like silence, so that's kind of not that useful. And I feel like I'm on the loop. There we go. I was on the wrong function. I'm gonna undo because that was on the looper. I'm gonna show you the loop in a second. Okay, standard. Great, so this one allows you to trim tracks that way, so and so forth. The other thing you can do with the trim tool is apply fades and crossfades. So a fade is used, like if I open that up, a fade is used to fade out a track. So that's at the beginning or the end. And if I, you see how if I go up to the right-hand corner, there's this little box with 2 diamonds. I can just click and drag to fade out, or I can go to the other end and fade in. So that's your fade. If you ever want to delete a fade, you can go with the grabber over the fade and delete just the fade. If I start, I'm going to just do something here. I'm going to just copy paste this whole chunk and kind of put it together in a real quick and dirty way. If you have chunks that are kind of laid up against each other and you drag over the bottom, you can create what's called a crossfade. Crossfade. That basically covers the seam between 2 spliced chunks. Like you think like old school editing had actual tape, pieces of tape that they would cut and tape together. This is your tape. So you do that by just hovering over the bottom, and you see how there's kind of a black triangle, a box with a black triangle. Oops, skip invalid fade. Okay, that creates a crossfade. Oh, and I didn't have my tracks touching each other enough for it to give me a valid fade. Okay, so that's fades and crossfades. And you'll work with that more once you start piecing all your chunks of what you want to use together. Let's drag another musical chunk so we can kind of actually make this more legitimate. Let's just do the second one, Bob James. We're going to drag Bob in there. Great. And I'm going to rename this Bob James. Click OK. Great, and let's take a listen, see what that sounds like. So we have a little drums and percussion, and then we have our Al Green, which is little brass drum groove, bass and drums groove. All right, so there's some editing modes. So the editing modes are up here in the left. It says shuffle, spot, slip, and grid. And if you're on slip, actually, I want to show you a command first because I can't do what I need to do. On editing shortcuts, to zoom in or zoom out, it's command bracket in the window. So you got to put it in the window. The right bracket zooms in, the left bracket zooms out. So this is the 2 keys to the left of the letter P on the keyboard. Command, or if you're on PC, it's Control. Mac is Command, bracket. The right brackets zoom in, left brackets zoom out. And as I had these tiny little files, I hate editing with when you can't really see. I like to be able to see how you can see all the little blips in the waves. In the sound waves, then you can kind of see what you are doing here. All right, and then I want this to go over just a little bit so we have a little more room to work. Okay, great. All right, so that's a very important shortcut. Try to use as many shortcuts as you can in Pro Tools, because otherwise you're going to give yourself carpal tunnel in your wrist from too many mouse clicks all day long. It's also much faster. Okay, so these editing modes. So we have slip, which allows you to basically, like what it says, you can slip the tracks. And if I, for example, copied this, copy and pasted it, and I had 2 tracks on top of each other, I can, you know, whatever track I select on top, I could actually slip it over the other. Or if I want this one to be on top, I could slip it over. See how they kind of go on top of each other? Or I can decide, I want this to go all the way back to here. So it basically, slip allows you free form editing of the sound, which is really nice. Shuffle, everything pulls to the left. So like if I had a track, let me grab this, like, you see how I moved it and it didn't give me an option to, it like basically acts like a magnet. It snaps everything to the left. And this is useful if you're doing something where you don't want any gaps. So just be mindful if you're on shuffle and you can't figure out why everything's going to the left. Spot editing is more useful if you're maybe working with film or something like that. You can actually tell it exactly what timing you want things to start. I don't think we really need that for this project. Grid, adjust to the grid. Do you see how there's these boxes? That's the grid. So this might be useful. Some of you might want to, you know, edit with the grid. Do you see how when I drag it now, it only snaps to the grid? That can be useful if you want, you know, things, if you're really working with a time-based thing and you want things to happen exactly. So it depends how you want to, you know, conceptualize this and work with the sound. So slip is the most versatile probably for this project, but you're welcome to go in between the different modes. All right, so a little bit about these editing shortcuts. So here's where we're at. Like I said, space bar. Right, space bar allows start and stop. Command bracket to the right is zoom in. Command bracket to the left is zoom out. So use those a lot. Command E allows you to break a track. So let's say right at this point, you want to create some kind of loop or something. Command E cuts the track. Do you see how it just created 2 sides now? And then I can sort of, you know, cut, maybe I want to even insert, you know, something in there like that. That might be kind of cool. We'll see. I'll let you play with that. If you decide in the end that you did all these cuts, oops, that you did a bunch of cuts and, oh, that was Control E, I did the wrong one. If you want to combine 2 chunks back, it's Shift Option 3. So if you have to select both chunks, Shift Option 3, it'll heal the wound. We'll seal it back over. Isn't digital technology so awesome? No one knew that cut was even there. We'll never be able to trace it. So that's how if you want to join the tracks back. Those are probably the most useful shortcuts for this project. Any questions so far? Before we go on, I'm going to show how to do some of the effects now. I'm just going to show you everything on the list. We don't have too much more before I'm going to let you just go at it and start doing it. So, so you'll probably want to do some looping, right? Because I didn't give you that long of samples. So let's see if I can actually, can I heal this one back up? Shift Command Option 3. There we go. Okay, now I have a full track again, and then maybe I can do that with this one too. Not close enough. Shift Option 3. There we go. Okay, now I have 2 complete segments again. You may want to loop, and there's an automatic way that you can loop. You could, of course, do what I was doing. You could select the track, Command C, Command V, copy, paste, but under the selection tool up here, you can go down to what's called loop. So, and you get that, you see that there's a little down arrow on the tool? You get to open up the extended features of that tool. So I clicked loop, and now when you drag, it will loop it it'll just loop the track indefinitely. This will probably be very useful. And do you see how it creates, there's kind of these double bars and then a little arrow that shows you where the track starts over. That's really nice if that's an automatic feature. So you can see, okay, all right, that played it. So if you wanted to repeat it 4 times, you would know, okay, I did 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to do one more, 4. And you could actually stop right on the loop point if you want. If you're going to be real exact, what like really great sound engineers do is they they zoom way in to see, oh, okay, and then they cut to the exact point. I'm going to go back to the regular standard so I can go right to the point of the loop. There we go. Yay. So if you want to get real exact, you can zoom in and do that. Make a nice, clean ending to the cut or to the loop. To change the speed, so let's say if we have these 2 tracks, and I'm gonna zoom back to where I was. I'm gonna make sure the whole suite of tools is on so I can use them interchangeably. I'm gonna take these back to the beginning just to make a nice, so you'll notice these have a little bit of a, so the Bob James is like a little bit different speed, right, than the Al Green. So you can play with this manually, similar to like how a DJ, early DJs did with turntables. You can adjust the speed. So this is, I'm going to have you do it. There's really complicated ways of doing this in Pro Tools with like plugins and applying all this stuff, but we're going to do it again, quick and dirty way. We're going to use the TCE version of the trim tool. It's TCE means time compression. So this is down here under changing the speed and the directions. And whoops, I don't want to do that. Undo, Command Z, undo. So you can literally just drag it. Let's say if you wanted these 2 tracks to be equal length, it changes the speed automatically. So I made the slower track even slower. So let's see what it sounds like if I drag it maybe just to this first repeat in the other one. Let's see how that lines up. That's pretty funky. So you can play with that. Maybe what if I just made this one a little bit slower overall and this one a little bit faster. Let's just see what that does. So that's almost getting cool, maybe, you know, see what you like. Obviously, I'm not doing a polished product, just giving you examples of what you can do. This is, you know, your creative project. All right, so effects. So you got to change the speed of at least 2 of your samples, and inevitably you will to make them match anyway. But I want you to have experience applying some effects. So the first thing you'll do, and I want you to know about this is the mixer. If you push Command plus in Pro Tools or Command equals, whichever, they share the button, so it's actually Command equals, it'll open up what's called the mixer. You can also find this by going to Window, there's Mix or Edit. So if I click Mix, it'll take me there. If I click Edit, take there, Mix to the other one. So sometimes the Pro Tools gets stuck on the Mix window and then it seems like the Edit has disappeared. So just know that it hasn't disappeared, it's just you're looking only at the Mix window. Some people kind of panic when they only see the mixer. So this is just like what it says, like a mixer, if you've ever seen a mixing board. And we have our tracks. Here's the Al Green, here's the Bob James. And the way that we apply the effects, we're going to work with what's called the inserts. So you see these inserts up here. And I want the zoom window to go away. Can you go down here, zoom window? Yes, go down there. Yes, okay. So if you click on where it says insert and go to multi-channel plugin, so we're gonna be working with what's called plugins. You have all these different options and there's some pretty cool ones loaded in the factory presets in these computers. You have better ones even than on my computer. So let's just work with something where I can play around. So if you do something like EQ, you won't get so much of a sound change. It's not really an effect so much. So pick one like pitch shift or delay is kind of interesting. Modulation, these are all really interesting. Harmonic as well. Let's see what this fuzz wah is about. So you'll see I have the fuzz wah now plugged into the Al Green. And I'm gonna solo the track because I want to hear what it sounds like only for the Al Green track. Or likewise, you could just mute the other ones, but I usually just solo the track that I want to hear. And you can just click the space bar, check it out. And in real time, I can mess with the knobs. And there's no prescribed thing. You can just, like, this is your mad scientist experiment now. You can just play with it. I don't know about the fuzz. Let's try post-wah. And if you want to compare to what you had before to what you're playing with, you can click bypass. Bypass means it'll momentarily bypass the preset and give you the original. So I'd like to do that to compare to what sometimes you listen to stuff so much you're like, what did I even have before? So okay, I'm pretty happy. That's pretty cool. I can work with that. A little Jimi Hendrix-ish, it's cool. All right, so you got to do that at least twice to one of your tracks. Like apply some kind of effect, have fun with it, do something interesting. If you want to delete your insert, there's a little button. There's a little tiny circle next to the plugin, and then you can click no insert, and it'll clear out your thing. So if you want to clear it out, that's how you can do it. Or you can just insert something else too. So it's kind of interchangeable. Just think about how, like, again, the old school like synthesizers had patches, right? All these are our patches, basically, putting in different stuff. All right, so then exporting your file up here in Pro Tools. Pro Tools has a thing called bouncing. So you bounce to a disk. This used to take forever. Like I remember the first time I used Pro Tools, everything was in real time. So every time you went to the studio, if you wanted to get the files and you recorded for an hour, you had to wait an hour for it to bounce. Now it's super fast. So only one really important thing is you make sure mono summed. So I want your finished product to be MP3, mono summed. That'll give you a combined file. It won't separate the right and left tracks. And then all the rest is, if you put MP3, it automatically sets the sample rate and bit and everything. So that's how and then you click bounce, and just remember, be sure to be cued into where it's gonna save it on your computer. All right, so last part before I let you go at it. So I have a little blurb from a guy named Ethan Hine, who teaches at New York University, who does some online composition and production stuff. And this is from his blog. He says, one of the challenges in creating theory for producers or any online learning experience is how to build community. When you're in a classroom with people, community emerges naturally, but on the web, it's harder. So to make our emails welcome rather than intrusive, we decided to do a weekly challenge, 1-line prompts for music creation. So he's kind of doing these, you know, like send out emails to people for creating music and go at it. So this is something he does also with his guitar students, for example, the 1-note groove. So I took his prompts and I kind of reworded them for our project. So these are based on his original prompts. Remember, you have to use 4 samples. So keep that in mind as I'm reading these to give you ideas for how you want to build your composition. So there's the 1 idea groove. Create a song using just 1 idea threaded all the way through. The 2 idea groove, have an interplay of 2 ideas with the other stuff supporting it around it. 3 idea groove, 3 main ideas, filler. Or have 4 independent ideas, you know, take my minimum that I'm asking you to work with and have each 4 of those ideas be strongly their own kind of thing, commenting on each other. You could approach it as a call and response composition. So you have kind of this and that, and you have pieces sort of answering kind of question and response. You could take the classic approach, which if you listen to any kind of electronic dance music, repeat in sets of multiples of 4. So take a groove, repeat it 4 times, and then alter it. Or take a groove, repeat it 8 times as your palette, or repeat it 16 times. So all these things in groups of 4 sound good, and that's how these pop music samples were kind of designed anyway, so those will lend itself well to composing something out of that. You could think about narrow range. Create a song that combines timbres that are in the low range or all in the high range, excuse me, or alternate between the 2. Have stuff up high, alternating with stuff down low. You could look at it in terms of emotion. Emotional extremes 1, create the happiest song you can, or emotional extremes 2, create the saddest song that you can. Minimalism, create a song that utilizes silence. So it's the space around the samples that kind of shapes it. Or maximalism, create a song as super compressed as you can, containing no gaps or pauses. So that's just ideas to get you going if you're kind of drawing a blank, like, oh, where do I start, or how do I make this composition? Let me play you just 1 example of a student, a previous project of a possible outcome that someone from a previous semester had. And we'll just take a listen and then I'll let you go at it. All right, so that student used obviously the drums as the basis, and then that quote that was from the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that was like my generation, and then a little bit of Lil Wayne and Dizzy Gillespie kind of mixed in. So all right, let me see, I'm going to stop the share. Any questions from anyone in the class or folks on Zoom before we start? All right, great. We'll go to it and just let me know. Someone's going to chat. Okay, great.